right, thank you, Claire. So we're going to go off the bee memorization charts at the moment, and I'm going to say, so we're just going to tackle some of the Western and Mexican species of bee genera. As part of that, if anyone would like to volunteer to expand the bee memorization charts to include these additional genera, that would be great. When we were doing it, we were using a combination of existing guides, including the Discover Life guides, to look at unique combinations, but also would address Michener's Bees of the World, which, by the way, there, at least fairly recently, was a link to that guide that you can download. So you could have, which is very handy, I use it all the time, the Bees of the World second volume, I believe, as a giant PDF. So for those of you who are interested, we can try and track that down. I think I have that, Claire, in my standard links. I'm not sure it's still live.
It's in your standard links. I'll check if it's still alive. I think I also posted in our teams. We'll check both of these things right now to be able to tell you for sure.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to jump to, first of all, we're going to go back and use the guides a fair amount, and the bee genera guides. I just want to point out something. Let's see, how do I make this larger? What was that trick? Plus signs? Yes, okay. So I want to point out here, what you'll see is the standard Discover Life format, but over here you see a much expanded set of links and radio buttons and those kinds of things that you would normally not see when you, if you press the menu button up here. But if you look, and it may be difficult to see in the URL, we've added some code up there that a PIN number and a exact email address of a group that's permitted to do this. And we obtain, whenever we want to make changes, these PIN numbers, and then we can make changes from whatever computer we happen to be at. So here are the radio buttons and the what am I looking for? The means to change anything in the guide and create any new kind of guide. So we can help people with this if they want to develop additional guides or if they want to make substantive changes to some of the existing guides. I'm just pointing that out, that these are always changing. Whenever you're looking at one of our guides, it's the most recent one. And if something comes up where you disagree, as several of you have pointed out some things that needed to be updated and changed, then we're happy to make those changes, and we can do that almost right away. Additionally, for example, now that we're going out to the west and into Mexico, the guide, as you'll see, has all the Mexican states here, as well as the Caribbean. So officially, North America is would be Mexico and north of Mexico, but also the Caribbean islands. And so we've included those. And these are always in flux, because what you're looking at is the set of bees that could show up in each of these locations. So we developed this several years ago now when we expanded to Mexico and to the Caribbean, and I think Michael Orr worked on this quite a bit too. And what happens is that new information comes in, people expand ranges, sometimes there's taxonomic changes. So we're always looking for updating any of the United States, Canadian provinces, and Mexican states, as well as the Caribbean islands, in terms of the genera that we should list for them. Again, we're not documenting what actually has been documented for those places. We are indicating what could show up. So a lot of times you'll get a range extension in one area, and you might also decide that, well, it could also be in the adjacent state. So any information here that you see that indicates that maybe we haven't scored completely a genus for some of these subsets would be great, because obviously always the first thing you do is click on the locality where the specimen came from. So if that locality information is incomplete in terms of what list of genera could be there, then we want to update that. Okay, enough of that. We are looking at Oxaea today here as the first non-Eastern genera group, and I'm going to flip now to the the microscope, and so we're going to just take a quick look. This is what you would do in any specimen, particularly if it's a novel one or you're just starting out, is you take a look and look for salient features that might be important in terms of the ID string, because again, within Discover Life, after a while you get an idea of what's a rare, uncommon character and what's not. And if you find some rare characters, you can immediately go there and eliminate a lot of the other genera, or in the case of species, and quickly come to a quicker conclusion as to what the identification is. And the fewer questions you have to answer to get to an ID, the fewer chances you have of actually making a mistake along the ways too, of course. Either inadvertent, like, oh, you pressed the wrong button, or because maybe you misinterpreted something. So if we take a look at this is a male. I'm not going to go through how we look at males, because you guys have been doing this for a while. And if we look at the face, a couple things sort of stand out. Let me see if I can fix the white balance, and it's a little bright, but I will shade it a little bit. So what we see here is the eyes are converging greatly on the top. You have some pretty big oxae. We don't have, it's a male, but we don't have very long antennae. They're almost female-like in their length. These are just some of the things that might come up later. Here's the labrum, which is actually often trapped by the mandibles, but in this case is freed. And that labrum is much longer than wide, and that's a character that turns out to often be useful. We see by looking at the face that it's mostly, the integument appears to be brown, but there's some yellow wash here. Those kinds of colors come into play later. And that was something actually that I learned when I was playing with this species, because the genus was not scored for having the males having yellow on the face. So I was able to just change that as we went along. If we look at the thorax and then the abdomen, see a couple more things. One is there doesn't appear to be any yellow markings or white or red maculations, they would sometimes be called. It's not super obvious here. This is an old specimen. This could be 100 years old. Let me just take a quick look here. Well, it's not that important. These are Smithsonian specimens, 1921, I think. So there's 100 for you. But there's a lot of metallic reflections here, strong blue-green reflections throughout the abdomen. When we're looking at the wings, if we look at the wings more closely, oops, did I freeze? Looks like my screen is frozen here. I did hit something. Everyone should be frozen since mine is frozen. You can see I can move the cursor. All right, I can move the cursor, but when I move, I have moved the specimen.
Oh, yeah.
Let's look at view. Oops, view and image maybe. I think so. I hit something with my hand, and I think I may have frozen the screen when I did that. How about that? Oop, maybe I unfroze it. Okay, the plus sign. Plus sign is a freeze, no freeze thing. So back to the wings. So if we expand up here, looking at the wings, take a look at a couple things. One is you can notice, look at the length, very Xylocopa-y marginal cell. Super long compared to the width. It does have 3 submarginal cells there. And then when we go a little closer, it's looking like there aren't any hairs, and indeed there are not in there, in these interior cells, which leans us towards other groups. That's a relatively uncommon state. We'll take a quick look at the feet and the tarsal claws, rather. And the reason for that is if there is no aurolium, that also eliminates a bunch of species. And so I will try, I forget whether it has it or not, so we have to look it up. This is much easier when you rotate your specimen in your fingers rather than trying to do it as I am. You can see how much slower this might be. I'm going to take it off and just confirm it rather than, we kind of now know what that looks like, but the specimen's legs are all curled around, and I see what I think is aurolium. I also see that or do I? I see the claws are cleft. And you know what? I think I don't see an aurolium. I think it's just a pad. You know, it's kind of cheating, but we also know what the answer is here for this one, so we can check to see if our supposition is right. But just in terms of time, I'm going to say no aurolium, and let's see if that pans out in our evaluation here. Okay, so now let's jump to the guide. We are armed with information based on that scan of the specimen. So we know, I didn't look at where the specimen is. I know, well, let me just show you. You can go to the global mapper and you can type in any genus, both without, I think we've shown this before, without the an underscore, and now there's every record. You can see it's known from Mexico, but not from the US, according to this. And now if we add a underscore to that, we can see all the many, quite extensive number of species, and it's taking a much greater time to load at this point. So I don't know that we need to look at this any longer, but you can see that there are a number of Mexican and quite a bit of South American specimens there. But so we were going to use in the guide, if I can find where I was. Oh, I'm over here. B Genera, yes. We're going to use Mexico as our link. So up in the upper part are our large groups, Caribbean islands, Eastern United States. If we knew a Mexican state, we could use it down here, but we don't right now. We're going to skip over a lot of taxonomic information because we're going to pretend that we have no idea that it's in Oxaeae group, or however it is pronounced. But we do know that the thorax is not bright green or metallic green. We can start clicking here at any time, and we can take a quick look that our friend is in there. It is. We can see that there are no yellow markings on the thorax or white or red ones on the abdomen. Takes us to 118. We didn't look at this specifically, but the axillae on the rear of the scutum are not pointing out. We saw 3 submarginal cells. We didn't look at this specifically again, but we did not see the strongly bent halictidae wing venation of the basal vein. We didn't look at the jugal-divanal robe, so we're going to skip that. We thought that with our very quick look that there was no aurolium, and indeed our specimen is in there.
What would happen if you clicked both, since it was something?
Oh, if you click both, well.
Or I mean, if you click, yeah.
Well, if you click both, it'll be the same as clicking none, right? So it doesn't do really anything for you.
But is it something that
is that true? Let's see. You should come up with 76. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
if you click present because you were not sure,
well,
sometimes we have things scored for both when they're wonky.
Yeah. So if there was any question, then we would have scored it for having both, because again, when you're dealing at the genus level, you can have specimens that have, in this case, could have no aurolium or do have aurolii, depending on the species, so it will be scored for both. In this case, but I will tell you that usually the presence or absence of aurolium is structured that occurs at the genus level, and the species don't usually, some do not have and don't have that particular character. So we can leave it off, and let's pretend that we didn't see that, and we don't know the answer. We did see that the claws, when I was looking at it, very clear that the claws were cleft. So as Claire pointed out, it's good to be conservative. So I thought there was no aurolium. I wasn't 100% sure. I was trying to do it too quickly. The conservative approach is then not to use that character. So we will leave it off for now. It's a relatively big specimen, and I'm going to get out my ruler here and look at it quickly. So lengths for males and females, so I'm going 16, 17 millimeters, are only useful if they're at one extreme or the other. 16 and 17 is getting to be very large bees. So we should drop out some of the small ones. Indeed, we just lost 20 species that way. Oh, I did females instead of male. 16 and 17 for the male. And actually, I lose a few more that way because males tend to be smaller. If it's a something in the middle grounds, a lot of times you don't lose a lot of species by using the length, because you have to account for the fact that within a genus you may have very small and very large species. Okay, so now we're out in terms of what we wanted to use in terms of questions. We left a lot unanswered because we didn't know or we weren't sure. So we hit simplify with 37 left. That going to give us a whole bunch of additional information. A lot of these things we're not going to use. We don't have a female. We're not going to use that. We're not using taxonomy. We're skipping that. And here's a male. Antenna length. We noted that it was short. So here's definitions of short that we could look into. We're down to 27. I think I'm going to hit simplify again, since that took out quite a big number of species that we don't need the information for now. So female, not going to use that. Shortcuts, no. Female again. Head labral process. Okay, so in this case, we noted that it was quite long. So the longitudinal distance greater than the latitudinal distance. So that was pretty clear. And you can see from the number here, 8, that only a small number of genera compared to the equal and broad are scored for having a long labrum. Now, but you see 9 here. So what that probably means is that one of these genera are not scored for this character at all. So it's not going to show up. This says here 8 of the genera, in this case, had been scored for long. So we eliminated a bunch. I'm going to hit simplify again, creating another new guide. And so while we're doing this, we can also go over in here and say, okay, well, I don't have to use these characters. I know it's not a bumblebee, based on the look and feel of it, because I feel like I know bumblebees well. You can say, oh, it's not an Andrina for the same reason. So I can eliminate a couple things. And then a lot of these others, like, not sure. But I have eliminated two by just clicking them off. And now I hit simplify again. I can hit the search bar before I do anything. Oop, and we will try that again. And it gets rid of the two, so I don't have, I'm just annoyed by having those empty boxes there. So we're back in it again. Females, shortcuts, no, no, no. Male has yellow present on its face. That takes us down to just 4. Simplify again. Simplify is your friend because it's going to eliminate questions that are no longer pertinent. So a bunch of female things now are remaining. Here's this mouth parts, long tongue versus short tongue bees. So that would be way more useful if, in many cases, the tongues of bees under normal circumstances were very visible. Now, in our specimen, if we look at it from the side, which we won't spend too much time doing, because it's very difficult to see the tongue here. You can see that the tongue, parts of the tongue are folded up as they normally are under the hypostomal cavity, and you can see it here, but you can't see much. You can't even see what's going on the tip, which turns out to be a highly useful Genera guides. But what if you can't see it? Then you either have to relax the specimen, take it out, or start following multiple lines. In the case of the Discover Life guide, you just skip that question. Same like here, subintennal sutures turn out to be a great character, but if we look at our lovely little Oxaea specimen here, focus it, we will see that the area which we would look at subintennal sutures is completely covered in hairs. So I could spend time getting rid of the hairs there, but I'm like, why bother? Maybe if we have to, we'll come back. So, but I might take a look here, like what happens, I can click the 3. Oh, and the Oxaea has disappeared, right? So it clearly has 2, if I were to see that. We already know the answer, so this is cheating, but these kinds of explorations are, have no cost. So it's sometimes useful to play around and then click everything back off. So here's a male T7 with lateral teeth, as would you might have. So you can see, just to point this out, that's still remaining, but I've clicked these off here where we were playing around. That's the state having 2 submarginals that left us with that. But I click them off. I have to click search again to get everything to show up. So male with abdomen, T7 with lateral, a lateral tooth or angle without lateral teeth. If we take a quick look, we should probably see, so teethy things I think of as userine characters. I don't know if it's limited to that, but that's what these guides are about. And when we focus in here, I see hairs, I see clumps of hair, and I see no teeth whatsoever. But maybe there's a tooth in there and I can't see it well. Remember, we're cheating by knowing the answer. But I'm going to just take a quick look here. What happens when we have a tooth? Oh, I'm down to 2. So I'm either double scored for some of these, or one of these is not scored at all. And with 3 having without, I'm not seeing any change in the original 4. So I'm going to skip that. Jugal lobe, that could be good. Let's take a quick look and see if we can find a jugal lobe here to look at. Wing jugal lobe of high, oh, absent or present. That seems to be a pretty interesting thing, because most of the time, I believe only bumblebees and apparently one of those 4 have no jugal lobe. So focusing in on the hind wing here, there's the vannel lobe. Okay, this is the hind wing, rest of it there, vannel. Now, the jugal lobe would be down here, unless it's not there at all. Let me look on maybe the other side. Maybe it's clearer over here. So that's a problem in some ways, which is, again, you would have to clean out everything around the base of the wing to see what's going on. And that's often inconvenient. It depends. So the state of having a jugal lobe is often easier to see than not having it at all, because to make sure it doesn't have any, you would have to clear out all these hairs. I am not sure, because I have enough hair here, and I'm also feeling like, well, let's see if there's another way to that. But I'm curious, let's see what happens if we do absent, and it's not, it's eulema. So underneath there somewhere is a jugal lobe. But we don't know that at this point. Here's our aerolium, so we'll get all 4 back again. Here's our aerolium character. Now, when we say absent, because we have secret understanding, we do end up with 3 left there, but let's leave it off. We can come back and confirm that it is absent if we wanted to. We also noticed, if you remember, that there were no hairs within the internal cells. So we know that one. So we're going to click that. And oh, sorry. There's your mistake. I too quickly clicked this one with numerous minute hairs when I really wanted to say largely hairless. Okay, that got rid of one thing.
30-minute warning if we wanted to get through.
Okay, yeah. The others are easier, but yeah, who knows how many we're going to get through. So we can hit simplify again. And a lot of this is guide thinking in a way. So we now have 3, and you can see what we're looking at is multiple avenues to the correct answer as we get further and further along. So what we're trying to avoid is guessing or making assumptions. So we're really just concentrating on the things that we have control over. All right, so female characters, no. Shortcuts again, no, no, no. Mouth parts, these are very technical. So long tongue bees are defined by on the label process, first 2 segments or elongate of the palpal, of the labial palpus. So that has to be extended, and it gets really difficult to see. Even when they are extended, a lot of times those palpi are snapped off. So it's not necessarily true that a long tongue in itself makes for a long tongue bee. It often is associated with that, but not always. Okay, so this is unusable because that tongue is way tucked under there. We have looked at these and we haven't scraped, we don't feel like scraping off. So we looked at this and thought, oh, maybe to be conservative, we won't answer that. Same thing here and same thing here. So so because we have our half-hour warning, we're left with some things that we can answer with a little bit of work. So if we do our work, we can click on no aerolium. Now we're down to 2. We can look at this and we can say there is a jugal lobe. And now we have our answer. Let's see what happens when we click that off, but we just say there's no lateral, oops, without lateral teeth. Do we still have two? We still do. If we say there are two subantennal sutures, we're back again. So just with this, with leaving behind these technical ones, actually, now I'm curious. Let's say it's a short tongue bee. Yeah, we can get to it that way too. So that's the beauty of these guides if you do it conservatively. All right, Claire's reminding me to not dawdle, no dawdling. And so we'll go to another desert western bee, and that is Ptiloglossa, which does occur in Arizona. So we're going to use Arizona in our thing. So now I finished with that one. I just hit restart. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to go to Arizona. And these, again, we don't know if they're true. We're going to take a quick look through our specimen here and zero this down. All right. Again, you don't have the scale here. This is a big bee. So we will use that for sure in our identification string. It is a female, and you can see on its hind legs that it's got scopal hairs on the femur and the tibia. And if we go in further, we get to use some of these nice female characteristics. We can see, for example, that the scopal hairs, pollen-carrying hairs, are finely divided. So it's not just simple hairs, it's hairs with branches on them. And it's a very dense-looking bee, like the vibe on it is, look at the fur-like hair on the scutum here and the scutellum. We don't see any projections. We don't see any color or maculations on this bee. If we look at the face, we see, you know, a big ocelli for some reason, but we'll pocket that. These eyes are parallel. We see a clipeus, not super long antennae in any way. If we take a look at the labrum, these are useful at the genus level. We can, well, let's see if we can see I have to put it even further upside down, the labrum and the mandible. So how many teeth are on the mandible can be really useful. We also have closed mandibles, right? There's the labrum. These mandibles are closed over it. A lot of times, and in this case it's true, I can't, or you can't, or no one can tell, is that a long labrum? Because we don't know what's going on back there. If it was sticking out or something, maybe we could go there. Let's see if we can determine toothiness. Here's its lapping. Here's the outer part, so that's one tooth, right? If there's a mandible, there's at least one tooth, and then here's a second tooth and nothing else. So it has two teeth. And if we were looking at the hind legs, these are poking out. So let's see if we can find whether it has a rolium or not. Ignore my dirty hands from the garden. And let's zoom in here. And I see an aurolium pad sticking out there pretty prominently. So we'll go with that. That's a good start on, oh, let's just look at the wings. It's almost always part of the workflow for specimen ID. We have 3 submarginals. If we look at the tip of the marginal cell, often used in separating out big groups, but a little bit tricky, we will take a look and see if where the tip is. So in this case, it seems like that's kind of cut off. So it's a little ambiguous. That could be the tip. It could be angular. We might ignore that for now. And if that's the tip, then it's a distance away, but not liking that. I can see hairs in the cells there. So that's a start. Let's jump now to the guide. I'm sure we'll have to come back. So hit restart. I'm going to hit search, and that will bring everything back up. We're going to go, oh, I'd already started, I think. Maybe not. Here's Arizona. And skipping over this, it is not these greenish colors. It does not have markings on its body. Its axilla is not poking out. It has 3 submarginals. Basal vein, which we didn't pay much attention to, is gently arched. We didn't look at the jugal lobe. We did find a rolium, and these were cleft. Let's see, we're down to 43. Is our friend in there? Ptiloglossa is in there. Length, it's a big B, so let's do a quick look at its length. And it's bent over, so I'm imagining it getting pulled up. We're at the 17, 18 again, millimeter for a female. Hit that. We're at 25. Now, new guide, simplify. Female pollen, now we got some good female action. So if there were no scopa, it'd be parasitic. Here we have, it's on the tibia, on the femur, and underside. Well, a lot of times it can be on both, but being on the femur is a much less common characteristic. So I'm just going to click on the femur part. And indeed, that takes us down to 9. And there's Ptiloglossa. I'm going to hit simplify again. And we can go through skipping. Oh, females, mandible, teeth, there were 2. What does that do for us? Takes care of a couple. I'm going to leave that on there. Labrum, couldn't tell. Male, male. Antennal sutures, very hairy face, can't tell what they are from that. Length, head, tongue, bilobed versus simple. Let's see if we can see anything on that tongue. We just have to find the tip in this case. And sometimes the tip is available for inspection. I can't recall if this specimen that was true or not. All right, very hairy there. I'm gonna dip it upside down for a quick sec. And we got something. Oh, that is the pin, not the tongue. So at least on this quick inspection, it looks like the tongue is tucked in there and difficult to see. So we're going to skip tongue characters and see if we need to do that again. Secondary characters, well, we were looking at that, right? This is the marginal cell, and it was a little difficult to say whether it was pointed or rounded or squared off. And if we just play with that, you see there's Ptiloglossa on that character, and that is also on that character. So what it does is it acknowledges that it's sort of in between. And so it's safe, right? You can click on either and you'll still get Ptiloglossa in there, eliminating some of these other groups. But because you don't know, it's best to leave it alone in that case. There were no facial fovea. We won't search for that. So basically, fovea occur in these andrenids like Hylaeus and Andrena. There were none in this particular case. Male character, Oxeae versus Andrenidae. Maybe we'll skip this. Oh, look, there's a Ptiloglossa versus others. But let's keep going. So we have the ambiguous marginal tip shape. So here it says the marginal cell, as in Xylocopa, super long and slender, but we know it is not. And else, look here, 2, it's only stored for 2 and only for 1. A lot of times in these more directed characters where you're just trying to eliminate one group, it's not scored. The other genera are not scored widely. That's something that we could add at some point, but in this case, we were trying to eliminate Xylocopa from a few other species. So here, we click Other, and we're down to 4. In this case, I feel like it's worth now simplifying again, jumping across male characters, skipping these things that we can't see easily. And now, though, we are stuck with going back to some of these other characters. So if we're looking at this, what we're going to look at is like, okay, which of these things can we do? We can claw off the subantennal sutures.
What happened to that Ptiloglossa versus other ones?
Well, it disappeared probably because it was only eliminating Ptiloglossa from a selected other things that are now off the generalist. They disappeared for other reasons. Right. So it might be like in terms of guide development, we might want to have a expanded Ptiloglossa score that particular one for more specimens, which we can, but you'd have to also confirm that the states of not being a Ptiloglossa would apply, for example, to these. So here we are given some things that we have not explored, and I don't have time to pull off the subantennal sutures, but if there were 2, that would get rid of Meg Andrena, it appears, and now we're down to 3. These, interestingly, are Halictidae, which if we had left them in their traditional place would be eliminated because of the arched basal vein, but we decided that Dionomia and Nomia sometimes don't look all that arched. So we left them there. Now, if we look at bilobed tongue, if we had to, we could open that up. And there's Ptiloglossa. So that's in our guide development, we have a button that's called Resolve. It's on the menu up there. And that allows us to look for collisions between, in this case, genera that don't separate out in any way within the guide. So, but it doesn't do things like help the guide be a little more efficient. Like in this case, that will separate it out from these 3. But if you can't see the tongue, then it's a worthless character. So I think in the future, we would want to look at more Ptiloglossa versus, say, those last 3 things would be helpful. Here, this was one that, if you chose this one, would leave Ptiloglossa also, but you would have to decide on an ambiguous wing structure, which we decided we didn't like. And then the rest are male characters and shortcuts. So you can get there in several different ways, but in this case, you're really stuck with being able to see the tip of the tongue to clear up some things. So in thinking about the guide, we would want to make it a little more robust and give you more options to determine Ptiloglossa from other groups. So noted. And someone who wants to work on that, certainly could work on Ptiloglossa versus those last 4.
There's also a time where you could go to the menu, and I'm sure if you went in there into some of those like more specific characteristic descriptions, like you would probably say in the Nomia something about those opalescent bands, trying to separate it from another species or something like that.
Well, I think that like Nomia, that's a good example. So almost all Nomia have those opalescent bands, but I believe there's at least one that does not.
Oh.
So that gets, so you can qualify that. You can say almost all Nomia do, but you know, it's not an absolute character. But there are, I'm sure if you were looking at this small group here, that you could come up with a Ptiloglossa versus other genera, and indeed that character that was eliminated could also eliminate these potentially, but you would have to score these for the non-Ptiloglossa state in those. So that's part of, you know, our job, and hopefully your jobs too, to help the guide be more robust. So in this case, it works just like dichotomous keys work, but you also, as in often the case with dichotomous keys, end up stuck in some place because you can't see or find the character. In Discover Life guides, you are less likely to be stuck, but you have so many more options in the guide to not completely characterize the species, because now, what is it? If we restart the guide here, how many genera are we dealing with? We're dealing with 162 genera. Each genus, or most of them, have multiple species that have to be considered when you're scoring them. So it gets to be a little complicated. All right, let's see if we can get to Tetrapedia.
While you're pulling up that B, I want to direct everyone to the chat for the link that JB Dory just shared. If you open it up, it has a nice analysis of the diurnal, facultative, and low light characteristics of so many different bees.
Oh, that's the large Oxeae, probably, eh?
A.
A.
Maybe we'll have a chance to chat unmuted.
All right, so.
You got 10 minutes.
All right, 10 minutes. Tetrapedia, let's take a look at this. This is a small bee, 8 to some millimeters, also a very dirty bee. If we look at it from the vibe point of view, no yellow markings. If we look at the, I should have chosen it easier. Well, these are, no, I think these take less, but we look at the femur and the tibia, and there are, there's a little bit of scopal hairs on the femur. Most of it's on the tibia. If we look, there is the hind leg. Is that a lack of a aurolium there? Let's see what we can find. Zoom all the way in, I think. So we know it is a female. We know it's not parasitic. Ooh, that might not have an aurolium. Let's bend this. Again, we don't have much time. Having some refresh issues. Oh, okay. So again, at this level, I can't quite tell. So we're going to probably skip it. It might have an aurolium, but small one there. Let's jump right to the guide and start in on it. So if we go to the global mapper and do Tetrapedia, we can see, again, it's mostly Mexico South. So we will include in the guide just Mexico as a whole there. As we go down, we will note that it is not blue or green in any way. It does not have any markings on it. The axilla, I noticed this already, is not pointed. When I was checking these over, it had 3 submarginal cells, not strongly bent. And let's see what happens there. Probably quite a few left behind. Let's look at I believe the jugal and vanal lobes were pretty easy to detect here. And I think they were quite long, like the jugal lobe, which usually is short in most species. So if we look at this, let's see if we can zoom in here. The dirt is pretty atrocious. So, I can't, again, I don't want to spend too much time, but I believe that, this is one of the lobes. Let's just see what happens here, and we'll pretend like we have looked at it quite well. Let's see what happens when we do, because the state is a lot less. Is Tetrapedia still there? No, it is not. So we made the error. Well, let's just see if we made an error earlier. Tetrapedia is there. So if we were to look and we believe that the guide is done, then the jugal lobe is much less. And there it is. We're skipping the aerolium, although we might take a quick look. And well, Tetrapedia is listed as absent, so we'll pretend that didn't happen. Hit cleft inner because it had that. And it's small. I'm eyeballing it and saying 8 to 9 millimeters for the female. We'll now simplify and scroll through. Pollen carrying hairs. It has pollen carrying hairs on the femur, which is the least common state. There it is still. We'll hit simplify again. Always look at those green numbers as a guide to, like, oh, if it has that state, that's going to eliminate a lot of things. Female mandible tooth. I believe, well, I should check, but I think it has just one. Very dirty specimen. There is mandible. We'll try one. I don't see any. Usually if there's a tooth, a second tooth, it's above the top. Are we running out of time, Claire?
No, I was just, that's really hard to see.
Yeah. I'm going to say, again, based on time, I'm going to say one tooth, which would be nice. He's only got a couple there. Let's see if that's true. And there's 3 there now. We know it's a female, and we know that we can eliminate Andrina because there was no, we have insider information because that would tell us that there would be a fovea in the face, which there was not. So now we're down to just the Melita versus Tetrapedia. And let's see what we have. So we have these shortcuts, which we're not using. We have a whole list of possibilities here. I think we have in this in view. I don't know if the labrum is going to be visible here because the mandible is closed. or lack of time, what happens? So we have them separating unless it's one is scored for both, and that might be the case. Yeah, so one of these two is scored for both and the other is not scored at all, so they stay and remained. Long versus short tongue, if we did go back and look at the Aurolium, we would eliminate Melita because it has a pad.
Would you scroll back up? I think it was the Pensilius or Pensilius. The scroll back up because I don't think we've looked at that character before.
Which character?
The Basotarsus.
Oh, we didn't. I'm not sure it's visible here.
I'm not sure if it is for this species in general. We've just never pointed out that character before.
Okay, yeah, this is one that I think the Paratetrapedia and Tetrapedia have, and maybe a couple others in that group, which are not ones that we have in the East. Let's see if I can locate that. And in a Paratetrapedia, I think I have, you could see it. I think I jumped ahead because I was not sure that we can see it because you have to see the inside of the Basotarsus, and there's a lot of floofiness here. So the problem is getting an angle in, yeah, so the problem is I can't really see in this specimen the inside edge of the Basotarsus because of the way the legs are held. You know, I might be able to see it if I were holding it in my fingers and getting just the right angle. So I can't show that character. If we had more time, the Paratetrapedia, I believe, has that. So, but yeah, that would also give us Tetrapedia, I believe. Yep.
And was that describing the Pensilius?
The Pensilius?
Yeah. No, that is not.
What is a Pensilius? I don't even know that term.
Little hairbrushy thing, or like paintbrushy thing, but on the outer edge, I believe.
Okay.
I haven't used it in a while.
All right. Yeah, I'm not sure. That may be what that's called. That is not a term I know. Okay, let's see if we have any other. Okay, now we're into these scored ones. So there's a male. So we have a couple avenues. You know, we can have gotten the answer by looking more closely at the Aurolium. That would give us Tetrapedia. We have a possibility of looking at the labral process. Oh, we determined that was not going to separate things out. If we wanted to, we could relax the specimen and pull the mouth parts, but as mentioned, that is not the most efficient way to look at these things. And we have the the Basotarsus character. So again, there's a little more work which we don't have time to do today, and to hunt down those characters. But you have several avenues to looking at Tetrapedia. If we are looking at this and we get rid of these things, and hopefully we get Melita back, we can go up here and look at the map. So it'll have maps of Melita and Tetrapedia. And what you see, remember we scored the location as just simply as Mexico, but if you look here, you see that the map of Melita, which is the yellow, does not overlap at all with the known map of Tetrapedia. So that gives you another, like, oh, the likelihood that it is, you know, you would know, for example, where the specimen was. And if it was, it should be in this area down through here, southern Mexico, and you would know, oh, it has to, pretty much has to be Tetrapedia based on currently known distributions, which you can get errant specimens but it's the zebra versus a horse kind of identification problem. You can also compare images if there are images in there. We have no images currently of Tetrapedia. In the guides, there are a bunch of Melita specimens, and sometimes it's really obvious by just looking at the pictures. And the same would be true of thumbnails. It's just a smaller scale type of thing of comparing specimens. And you would slide this over and you would see there are no pictures of Tetrapedia. So I think we'll stop there because we're at the end.
We have no questions queued up in the chat. We just had some fun conversations today. But if anybody has anything, you're welcome to unmute. I'm going to start our closing down habits here. But we'll be here for another couple minutes. If anyone missed it at the beginning, Erica Trucker is going to be sending out an email to the listserv about what was it, Big B, an awesome project, and you should listen to the things that are coming in that email. And then there's also a WASP ID course that is being offered online. I put it in the chat. I will put it in the chat again. Not by us, coming to you in January. And next week we will either continue with the Western species or jump back into the Spicodies that we missed and other assorted remaining genera that we use more often. Okie dokie.